Welcome everybody to the concluding webinar for our series. Tonight's topic is super fun. We are talking about choosing livestock for the farm, and I'm so pleased to have almost the entire NCAT Livestock and Grazing team with us tonight to teach. I want to thank Southern Sayer for funding this program. And as you come in, if you would participate in the poll, first of all, so we know something about you, and then introduce yourself in the chat so that we know who you are and where you're from. We would really appreciate that. We're going to take about a minute to do this poll, and then we'll get started with our content. Thank you very much. A lot of people on here, more than 5 years, but a lot of them are making plans. This is great. People have different amounts of land, mostly from the South. And everyone knows about the soil health principles. Great. All right, good. Next. All right, if you missed the last 2 sessions, I would encourage you to go back and get them because they set the foundation for how we're going to raise livestock in a way that is good for the land. So check out sessions 1 and 2. Our goal is by the end of this course, you've got the information that you need to steward your land well, make it better than it was when you got it, and that you know that NCAT's here to assist you. Next. Hi, Craig. This class is going to be so fun. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. We're going to provide some general tips for success with livestock. We are not going to talk production information tonight. We've done that before, and we'll point to the resources tomorrow in your follow-up email. But what we are going to do is give an overview of options. In each case, the person talking about the animal also raises the animal, has tons of experience with it, so you're getting a very practical viewpoint from that. I'm really excited for you to meet the NCAT livestock team. They're phenomenal, they're super helpful, and they're going to be great as you get going in your farm. I encourage you to reach out to them. We believe that if you manage them well, livestock can build the soil health on your farm and improve it and make it productive and healthy and beautiful. Next. We're going to talk about the tips for success. And the first things that we're talking about is, first of all, you have to know what are your goals, and your whole family needs to be on board with the goals. That's a starting point. Later, when we do the farm tours, each one of the NCAT people is going to talk about their goals. And I think you'll see that that's a fundamental thing so that you all know where you're going and can make good choices. Considering your resources first, and that's money, time, labor, you can fill in some more blanks. Next. We recommend that you start small. You're going to learn so much. I had a guy who talked about getting trainer goats. When you're getting goats, that is cheap, inexpensive animals, healthy, but inexpensive. So you can learn the ropes, learn about your fencing and your infrastructure, and get a feel for the animals before you dive in really big. So infrastructure is important. We don't know how many people say they brought their animals home and their fence was not adequate. Don't make that mistake. And learning comes from things that like the webinar, but also visiting other farms. I think that's super important. And getting a mentor, somebody who's got experience with the animal that you want to raise. That will really be vital, I think, as you go forward. Next. I said earlier, you can buy inexpensive animals, but you sure want healthy ones. You're not going to be happy with your farm, your livestock, if you get animals that have all kinds of problems. So if you don't know how to assess the animal and get a healthy animal, take that mentor with you. Take somebody who's not going to fall in love with the animal and you know, you want someone who's going to notice the fine points and steer you in the right direction. Don't go to the sale barn. Even if they got there healthy, they're going to walk through germs and stress and transportation shock, and you're not likely to bring home a healthy animal. Keep records so you know which ones to keep and which ones to cull. And this is in big, bold print. Keep it manageable. I'm talking to myself here. When you have too many animals for the labor force, it's not manageable anymore. It's not enjoyable anymore. So you constantly revisit what you've got.
Onions first. You're warm enough, right?
Margot, you got anything to add for the tips to success? Okay, next. We've said this over and over. You have to respect the limits of your land base. Your land can support a certain number of animals, and if you go over that, you're causing damage to your farm. Don't do that. Respect the soil health principles. We've gone over these before. They are real and they matter. Next. When it comes to choosing an animal, there's lots of things that go into this. First of all, what do you like? If you like the animals, you'll do a better job taking care of them. If you're afraid of an animal, don't try to, if you're afraid of an animal, don't try to raise it, okay? Just start with something you're comfortable with and that fits your land. Justin talked last week about a producer who had perfect goat land, meaning brushy, and they tried to use it for cattle. So let's think about what the animals need and what your farm actually is. And then that goes into the resources. What kind of forage, what kind of fencing? If you've already got fencing and housing and handling facilities, you're lucky. When we got our farm, had nothing there. It's gonna take a lot of money if you have to build all the infrastructure. And you should look about how much money you have to start and what the cash flow will be for your enterprise. And then, of course, look at the labor. As I said, you've got to be able to take care of the animals well. I have got a picture here of Dave Scott. Dave is an NCAT team member too, but he's recently retired. He's in the cooler looking at his lamb carcasses. This is to bring home the point. If you're selling meat, find out about the processing and the market options before you go big into an enterprise. Next. Can you please put in the chat the animal or animals that you would like to raise, that you want to add to your farm? We'll just give you a minute to do that. Okay, cattle and horses. Hair sheep. Guinea hogs. Catherine says bison would be amazing, but not enough land. Yeah, that's something that needs to be thought of. Laura has bees and chickens and interested in sheep. Okay, great. I see a lot of interest in bees. This is awesome. We've got you covered. All right, thank you all. Next. Linda Poole, take it away.
Well, I didn't see anybody who's interested in worms, and that's unfortunate because, boy, there's one type of livestock that's easy to start with. Wallabies, Crocodile Dundee. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't be reading the chat. I'm getting distracted. Oh, there we go. Somebody has worms. I was going to say there's one type of livestock we all have if we have land, and that's the livestock that's beneath our feet. And that brings us back to the soil health principles and soil biology. But the worms and there are worms down there, and that's part of what's important. But the worms I'm talking about are red wriggler worms, and they are a non-native species that you buy and that you can use in a little bin in your house, in a 40-foot long compost pile on your farm, anything in between, to turn a lot of the output of your animals and of your kitchen into basically garden gold. So there's almost nothing that's more valuable than worm poop, ounce for ounce, in taking care of the fertility of your land. And it's easy to get started. Just Google vermiculture or red worms, and you'll come up with thousands of hits. I've shown 3 here that I think are pretty helpful. DIY Natural is a fun website for getting started with all sorts of things, and how you can build your first worm farm with a couple plastic bins, get a little fancy, make a wood one that looks beautiful. They're very easy. I would consider this as something that is completely compatible with every other livestock or farming enterprise that you might have. And I don't think that we would say that the rest of these necessarily stack together well. Tracy will be talking about stacking enterprises, and I guess my little part of this is I think worms fit with everything. And I'd encourage you to give them a start. They're low cost. They can turn your kitchen into a place where you're building fertility for your soil. It's a great thing to do with children to get them around the idea of livestock and the care that you have to give and the great rewards that you can get by having healthy but tiny livestock. Next, please.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Pressman. I'm an agriculture specialist with NCAT, and I'm also a beekeeper. And I have the impossible task of talking about bees in 3 minutes. But it's great to see that there's a lot of interest on tonight and several beekeepers, and I believe I even saw an entomologist. So you all know that when we get together and start talking bees, that we're in for a long haul. Just getting started here with bees. For those of you who are interested and don't have hives yet, generally when we're talking about honeybees, we're talking about having honey, which is an excellent enterprise to have on your farm. Although could take a while for a good return on investment. There's quite a bit of upfront investments involved. So I'll talk about that here in a moment. But generally speaking, the reason I got started and a lot of us really focus on is pollination. About 70% of the world's crops are pollinated require pollination. That's about 1 out of every 3 bites of food you take. For pollination, if you have crops and fruit trees or anything on your farm besides livestock that require pollination, having honeybees is really a great opportunity for that. Although I will say, if you're interested in increasing pollinator habitat and having pollinators on your farms, but are not interested in having honey or have the time or to spend managing hives or want to put the investment in, there's a lot better pollinators out there than the honeybee. But if you are interested in honey and all these other products here, you do need the honeybee. So in addition to honey, there is pollen and royal jelly, which is the queen's food, as well as cut comb, which includes the wax with the honey, are great products. A lot of value-added products, including candles, soaps, honey wine or mead, if you can tolerate it, and several other value-added products as well. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity, particularly for those of you who have a few years under your wings, to get into packages, nucleus colonies, and queens, which are really important. This is how a new beekeeper really gets started. And unless you catch a swarm, you're buying a package, which is about 1 to 2 pounds of bees. A pound is about 3,000 to 4,000 bees. And the package has a queen that has not taken her maiden flight, so she's not laying yet. And so, you start with a package, or you can go with a nucleus colony, which is a little bit more money, but you're getting a queen that is laying fertilized eggs. And so you get about 5 frames, and you sort of have that significant jump in the establishment of a hive going with the nucleus colony. Of course, we always can use queens, particularly that are bred to local areas or certain genetics. And queens need to be replaced every few years to really keep the hive going strong. They definitely start to slow down after a few years. And also there are, I don't know if medical treatments is the right language here, but medicinal value in honey products and products from the hive, as well as therapy. I know it's sort of my place to go for, instead of counseling, I sort of zone out, and I'm putting my hands into about 50,000 bees per hive. So I definitely have to be in the right state of mind. But there's also a lot of research being done on the effects of keeping bees and sort of managing things like PTSD. So a lot of opportunity there as well. Next slide. So getting started with bees, just looking at the picture there on the right, that is a swarm if you haven't seen one. It's a pretty big swarm, but as bees swarm, they fill themselves with honey, so they're pretty calm. So the idea is you want to catch the queen, and therefore you can get a free hive. But this sort of used to be looked upon as sort of bad beekeeping if your bees were swarming, but it is their natural tendency, and so it's definitely the mindset of swarming is definitely changing, particularly in this country. But getting started, I think Linda, you really nailed it. Sort of talking about what are your goals and what's your motivation for having livestock on your farm, and same with bees. Where does it fit in with your overall family and farm goals and what you're managing towards, and as well as in terms of other enterprises that you have. Also knowing what regulations there are, both whether you're in a rural or urban area, as well as state regulations. Some states require inspections, others don't. So just making sure you do your homework and know what's required in your area. And Linda also mentioned the importance of finding a mentor, and I couldn't agree more, particularly with beekeeping. I still have several folks I've learned from on speed dial on my phone, and I know I get calls all the time from beginning beekeepers. Just that opportunity to be in the field and looking at something that you're just not sure about, and having that opportunity to just give someone a call and get that sort of reassurance is really valuable. Starting off in terms of costs, I think it's interesting to look at sort of two camps out there. One is the one hive camp versus the two hive camp. The one hive is basically saying, start with one hive. It's a pretty significant investment, possibly up to $500–600. See if you like it. And if you do, then you can sort of expand and grow from there. The other camp is the two hive camp, and that's sort of where I fit in. And that is sort of starting with two hives. It's a bigger investment up front. But within that first year, particularly with packages, colonies may be a little bit too weak to make it through the winter. So having two hives gives you the opportunity to combine them and create a stronger hive and reduce that risk of losing everything by springtime. So I mentioned sort of the genetic component, but looking for regionally appropriate genetics. A lot of queens come from Hawaii or Georgia, and pretty much bees start in the south and sort of move their way north. So making sure you have bees that are being bred for disease resistant or pest resistant, as well as really adapted to your local climate and region is really important. And also just having fun. As I mentioned, you're putting your hands in about 50,000 bees per hive. So if that's if you don't enjoy that and sort of add a peace of mind, then probably not the right enterprise for you. Next slide.
That's me. I'm Ann Beyer, and I'm a sustainable agriculture specialist, and I like chickens and other kinds of poultry. And I've been learning a lot about poultry over the past few years as I've gotten to visit a number of different farms. So this segment is about, is poultry the right enterprise for you, for your family and your farm? And I noticed in some of the pre-session questions, a few of you mentioned that you don't live on the land or need time away from the farm. Then raising worms or bees would be an excellent choice. If you're ready for a greater level of commitment to raising livestock, then poultry could be a good next step. Entry into raising poultry is less difficult than for swine or ruminant livestock. They need less land area, less capital, and the time frame of commitment is shorter. However, while you're in the business, meat birds require daily care and protection for 2 to 3 months for batch, and layers at least 2 years. So it is a significant step to begin. So I'd say start with the people. Start thinking about the plan. Who are the important people in your life? How do poultry fit in with them? Goals were mentioned. The goals exist for you, not you for your goals. Quality of life matters. Picture your enterprise. If you're taking a photo, that involves framing and focusing your strength and light. Stress reduces the productivity of plants, animals, and humans. And stress strains relationships and families and marriages and communities. So frame your farm enterprise and your life so that what you realistically can do is enough. A tree with too many fruit produces small bitter fruit that aren't worth eating if the branch doesn't break first. So your life matters much more than to overload it to the breaking point. Place. How much land will you farm? Chickens may be appropriate if, or other kinds of poultry like ducks or turkeys on a smaller acreage, but do be careful of nutrients because you're bringing in feed, importing feed to the farm. That's going to add a lot of fertility. We need to be able, in some cases, that's a real benefit to having poultry, is that it increases the fertility of the land, as long as it's not too much in one place. And I generally always encourage pastured poultry for a number of reasons, because it's good for the land and it's produces a high quality product. And it's a real market niche. So profitability, I can hear one of the farmers that I've spoken with and had workshops on her farm, Benita Montes, saying, does it pencil? got to look at the profitability. Several of you asked about capital and cash flow. Some preliminary work with budget and profitability calculator spreadsheets will help you assess the feasibility of the project that you envision. It's much easier to make adjustments and adapt your plans on paper first. NCAT has several resources. I have some budgeting tools in draft. Email me and I'll be happy to share them with you. Pricing needs to cover all your costs, including your labor. That's a piece that people commonly leave out. It needs to cover variable costs like chicks and feed and labor and product packaging, but it also your pricing needs to cover overhead costs like land, equipment, and insurance. Using profitability calculators to calculate those break-even costs for a dozen eggs or a pound of meat, you can experiment with that at different scales of production. You can compare fast-growing and slower-growing meat birds. You could compare the total production of layers that produce either, 200, compare the 200 eggs per year with 300 eggs per year, and estimate the retirement age when those lay rates decline. Then factor in healthy profit margins, because you need that to address unexpected events, to cover losses, to reinvest in your business. Work out your plans until they pencil. Then set up your record-keeping system so that once you begin producing, you can analyze your records and look at your bookkeeping and inform your ongoing decision-making. Next. So eggs or meat, or both. Enterprise selection needs to be in that context of the whole farm plan. So I mentioned that the goals are for you. So what species? Does it make the most sense to raise chickens or ducks or turkeys or squab, or are you a smaller animal person like quail and quail eggs or quail meat? There are a lot of options and probably several others that I haven't included here on this slide. The breed is really important. Choosing a breed that is productive, whose products are highly marketable. That's really important in eggs. People have really distinct ideas about what color eggs should be. Some people think all organic eggs should be brown. And others feel that it's important to have the rainbow mix. Those come with different levels of productivity. So choosing the breed very carefully, and then figuring out what products really make the most sense. And I note that eggs and meat are probably one of the main things we mentioned, but I've also presented at a few workshops where I realized that the main thing that people were looking for was something else, like improving their soil or therapy. And all of those are valid reasons. Some do farm tours and do agritourism. All those could be important, but just being clear about what your products are and scale. We'll come back to scale, but I really want to emphasize that scale is a balance of your production along with the regulations and marketing. And scale is rarely continuous. It's usually in these big steps, tiers. Next. Raising healthy flocks really begins with the chicks. And I've organized this section, the categories in the middle, on the main categories in the organic standards for livestock production and the USDA organic regulations for livestock. Those regulations describe in qualitative terms many of the practices that are just really good ideas for livestock production, whether you're certified organic or not. So starting with healthy young stock, chicks, poults, and getting those from a reliable source. And I really recommend an NPIP hatchery as the National Poultry Improvement Plan that will assure that there's monitoring and that you won't be getting chicks that are sick. Start with healthy stock, and then pay attention to vaccination. Merrick's disease is very common, or not very common, but if you get Merrick's disease in your flock, you may lose your whole flock. And I've seen that happen in some of the places that I've inspected as an organic inspector. So it's a very low cost investment in preventative health. Feed. Poultry are not ruminants. They need balanced rations with protein and carbohydrate. Pasture and foraging provides quality in a diversified diet and really enhances the quality of meat and eggs produced by the poultry, but it's not sufficient. You need to have a healthy ration that's appropriate to each stage of development. From the brooding stage is very important. As you all know, any small animal needs a lot of attention and a lot of care, a clean environment. So many of these parts of healthcare and living conditions are really about maintaining a healthy environment that's, appropriate, clean, dry bedding, clean water that's cool, because poultry will probably consume about twice as much water as they do feed. So we want to keep productive flocks by giving them clean water that's cool and nutritious rations. Living conditions, enough space to reduce stress, good airflow. Those two coops at the bottom with the red show that ventilation is really important. These are the UC Davis coops, and it shows that when the weather is cold, you can bring down that tarp and shelter them so that it's not drafty. But when it's warm, you need to have the air circulation and air flowing through. Natural behaviors, exercise, shelter, and safety. I'll talk a little bit more about predators in this next section, but predators are really, protection from predators is very important. And so the whole life cycle here from of chickens and eggs and meat, trying to keep them healthy at each stage, paying attention to that. And we have some good materials in both videos and publications in our ATTRA materials, and more to come. Next, business scale. I've put a few different contrasting scales of production here. There are several really important factors in considering a scale. The land, of course, if you have a small amount of land, you need a smaller flock. But certainly the efficiencies of labor and of capital and being able to invest in infrastructure, in the efficiency can increase as you plan carefully for a larger stewardship-based model. At the top, you see a smaller operation would probably buy feed in 50-pound sacks. A larger one is going to get it by the tote or the one-ton tote or the truckload and store it in silos. Recommending starting small is still a great idea. And I'd say this trial size and getting to know the chickens is really important. But as you grow, this upper right-hand corner shows a much larger automated type of housing. You may wash your eggs by hand or invest in an egg washer. At a certain point, you make the leap to invest in the equipment that will increase efficiency. Government regulations are also a very important part of thinking about scale. Whether you can slaughter your birds for meat on farm in a safe and sanitary way that also meets the exemptions for inspection, that's one question. And there's two publications about regulations, in particular with relation to slaughtering poultry or taking them to a USDA inspected facility. And predators. Predators are a really good and important part of a healthy ecosystem. They're also a significant source of loss. So managing your livestock system includes training potential predators that your livestock are not their prey. Keeping predators and livestock separate is much better for your livestock business and also better for the health and survival of the predator population. Livestock are not appropriate food for any self-respecting wild animal. So using appropriate shelter, if you're smaller scale, that may be just electrified netting or the coops and night shelter. Once you reach any size in a commercial operation, every really successful operation I've seen has used livestock guardian dogs, such as these pictured in this photo. So lots of factors to consider. And of course, the marketing, the regulations, and your capacity to do production all have to be ready to go in tandem. Next. Very briefly, labeling, there are many requirements for both egg and meat labeling that you'll want to consult USDA grades and requirements. There are also terms that have legal definitions that you need to use in appropriate ways. And then finally, there are claims that require third-party certification, such as organic and several types of animal welfare standards. And I've just mentioned a few here. This is not an exhaustive list and not necessarily an endorsement, but these are some of them that I've seen commonly used among the farms that we've visited. And I'm happy to be available anytime by email. You have our email, and I'll be happy to answer any future questions. Next. With these 5 types of resources, you should be able to be well on your way to developing a healthy and successful poultry operation. We're always here at NCAT. You all probably have within your county an agricultural extension service, and I've included in the resources a list, a way to find yours if you don't already know. But I do want to highlight these three organizations that are just stellar. APA is the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association. Costs $50 a year to join, and it'll be the best investment you spend if you're going to be raising poultry. Very active community committed to mutual education and support. And MPAN is a national extension organization, and you can go there and subscribe to the listserv. Again, people are very, very helpful in sharing information with each other, very practical. And some of the questions, finally, FACT, the Food Animals Concerns Trust, some of you asked in the pre-session questions about grants. And there are some grants through this, but also some very helpful webinars. And NCAT collaborates with FACT on several of those webinars. Thank you. Next.
So I'm afraid Linda overpromised a little bit when she said everyone had tons of experience about the animal they were going to talk about. I do not have tons of experience. I have a little experience with rabbits because I'm just going into them. But I can tell you I have a lot of experience with other livestock, and I'll give you some of the reasons why we decided to start raising rabbits. At the farmer's market, there's quite a bit of demand for smaller animals. Like, people don't want to buy an entire cow. They don't have a freezer space for it. They don't want a whole sheep because they're not sure how to cook all the parts. But a rabbit is something that can be manageable. It's at a manageable price point, and it's a manageable size for people. So we decided to expand into rabbits because it was something we could fit into our existing enterprises. And the great thing for us about rabbits is they're a little easier to handle. You don't need quite as much infrastructure. You can put them on pasture part of the time. You can raise them indoors if you need to. You can alter the size of your flock. Our breeding rabbits can stay inside for the winter, and during the summer, we can raise the meat rabbits outside on pasture. The good thing about rabbits also is that they have a short lifespan, so you can raise a batch and then not raise a batch and be done with it, and sort of control your workload that way, much more so than you can with a herd of cows, for instance. And then also rabbits are very productive, notoriously so. You can raise quite a bit of meat from just a few rabbits. Next, please. So one of the things we considered with our rabbits was putting them out on pasture. We've done that with what's called a rabbit tractor. This is the first iteration of it, and we have a lot of design improvements that we're going to make next time around, but it gives the rabbits a chance to be outside on pasture, still controls where they are, still gives them at the back section there a place to go inside out of the weather, to have a safe den area while you move the rabbits. This has worked well for us during the summer, and that is how we've chosen to do our production and our housing. Feed, rabbits are able to use pasture part of the time, but they're also needing to be supplemented with a pelletized rabbit food. We can't get their entire nutrition off of pasture, but it is something that you can do rabbit production on a fairly small piece of land compared to other species. You can move them around not such a big area, and they'll still get enough grass, which is nice if you have a small piece of land and want to produce a good protein source. Rabbits may be your option. Rabbit processing is something that varies extraordinarily from state to state. So if you're interested in rabbits, you're going to have to get your state's particulars, and that may not be as easy as it sounds. I cannot tell you how many state offices we had to talk to before we found the one that actually knew what they were talking about, because they all were contradicting each other about the requirements for processing and about what had to be done. As far as marketing, I can't tell you a lot about that yet because we haven't done a lot of it yet, but there are some options with rabbits. You may be wanting to sell rabbits as a show animal or as a pet animal or as a meat animal. You may be wanting to do fur, although I'll say to you, don't count on the fur market. I'm going to add one more side note here, which is suddenly in the pandemic, rabbits have become super popular, and it can be hard to get the equipment to build rabbit housing. If you're thinking of building cages or buying cages or water bottles or any of that, it can be a long wait to get the materials to build that. So please factor that in with a decision that you're going to make if you're thinking of doing rabbits. And next, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Lewis. I'm excited about the opportunity to be here with you all today to talk about potentially integrating pastured pork on your farm. My family and I have been raising and breeding hogs for a little over 10 years. I have listed here some of the main reasons that we actually decided to introduce them into our system. First, we found the low cost of entry and the high yield of protein versus the inputs very appealing. We're able to supplement their feed with significant amounts of food waste, and they forage pretty efficiently with proper timing of your grazing. We're actually able to integrate them into our vegetable rotations, so that does end up adding additional forage for the hogs, but also helping with our fertility rates. Pastured pigs compared to other livestock do not require as much space. And another big benefit, if you time your breeding properly, you don't have to worry about pasturing animals during the cold and wet seasons. Here in Kentucky, we actually raise 2 litters per season, and we never end up in the cold or wet season. So we're pretty fortunate with that. Next, please. There are a few areas of concern I wanted to make a quick note of, and the first of those is actually rising feed costs. Feed costs in my region have almost doubled over the last 18 to 24 months. So one of the things that I would encourage you to look at is make sure you have adequate pasture and forage, and also see what sort of local food waste resources you have to help keep your feed costs from running too high. It's also really important to make sure you speak with your local processor and understand their timelines and their requirements. Some processors won't take hogs or pigs over a certain weight, so that can be problematic. Typically, in our case, we connect with our processor and set our processing dates just as our pigs are starting to farrow. and no later than we've never scheduled processing later than when they've weaned, than when we've weaned them. Fencing can be problematic if you're not careful in your breed selection and your husbandry work. You should be aware that these are, as you can see, awful cute animals, but they are big and strong, and they can get out very easily if they are inclined to do so. Most of our fencing on my operation is 3-strand polywire, but we do introduce our pigs to this at a very young age. So within 7 to 8 days, we're running 1 strand of polywire inside of our farrowing pens. So they understand that at a young age, and we have very few issues on our farm. Not to say that that's not normal. That there are cases when they do break out, and it can be problematic. In our case, our pigs are primarily pastured in the woods, which does mean that we have to haul water. So keep in mind that to raise quality pigs, it does require access to clean water daily. So make sure that wherever you're pasturing them, you do have access to fresh, clean water without too much difficulty. You'll also want to consider making sure they have access to shade in the summer months and that they can avoid getting too hot. Conversely, the same in the winter. If you're pasturing them in the cool weather, make sure that they have access to warmth. And the last piece, which I think is probably in our case the most important, is pigs can generate a significant odor and can cause a significant amount of destruction in a very short period of time to your neighbors' yards and gardens, if they should escape. So we work very closely with our neighbors. In our case, we actually raise 2 pigs per year that we donate to the neighbors. So in the event that one of our hogs does break out, our neighbors promptly return them and have no issues with the little bit of damage that occurred. Again, I'll drop my email in the chat. Don't want to take any more of your time, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to jump on them and answer them. And I thank you all for joining us today.
So I get to talk about sheep and goats, not because I'm the only one or even maybe the best one, but I love sheep and goats. Sheep are what got me into livestock. I grew up with hogs and cattle and horses, but sheep were the animal that I felt comfortable with because of their small size, because they just are not intimidating. I love that they can be raised on forage alone. And just like Mike was saying about the hogs, you do not have to keep lambs through the winter. You can easily make a grass-fed lamb within 1 year, whereas that's not the case with cattle. They're great for weed control. That's what we got them for on our farm in Missouri years and years ago, and they do a great job on a lot of weeds. They have twins a lot, and one of the things I love about them, they can lamb or goats can kid at 1 year of age. So there's not much lag time. Your return on investment can come really quick. And there's so many marketable products. They're just very diverse and very useful animals. Make a note about solar grazing. As more and more solar power is getting in our country, there is going to be more and more need for solar grazing. The American Solar Grazing Association is a great place to go for information about that. And NCAT has an agri-solar network that's just starting up. So you'll hear more about that later. Next. Well, fencing is a deal for sheep and for goats. If you see the picture of the barbed wire fence with the wool hanging from it, I want to make the point that barbed wire is not a good solution for fencing for sheep or goats. They can get injured. It doesn't hold them, even lots of strands. Hot wire is a much better option. Woven wire is a good option in some places where we can't control them with the hot wire. The fleece is a problem at certain times of the year. Sheep that are allowed to get hungry will be really good at getting out of fence. So don't let them get hungry. Keep them good feed where they are. I love that you can raise them on forage alone, mostly. At some times of the year, the forage is just not good enough. And you can see down in the lower left, multi-species grazing happening on turnips. That's one way that we extend our grazing season. See the water tank? That's to remind me to tell you, try to have water in every pasture. They don't drink a lot of water. So we haul water to the back 40, and that's just fine, but do make sure you've got water. When you know how to graze them well, and when you graze following those soil health principles and the good grazing management that they taught you in session 1, that helps a lot with parasite control. But this is a significant issue for sheep and goats and something you must learn about. Predators, just like with chickens, is an issue. Livestock guardian animals are great. Marketing, I think it's pretty easy, but processing is a deal. Some processors don't want to mess with sheep or goats. So you will need to check into that and into any possible regulations. That's more for the dairy enterprises, that the regulations are super important. Think about what's workable. I raised dairy goats for many years, and at one point we were hand milking 13. Remember I said keep it manageable? That was not manageable. Also factor in your time for marketing the product and processing it. Thank you. Next.
All right, and this is Margot Hale, and I have my video off. I'm traveling in a hotel with poor internet, so we're making the best of this. So I'm going to speak just a few moments about raising cattle and some of the considerations for raising cattle. And the great thing, like goats and even sheep, you can get multiple products from cattle. Either meat, raising beef cows or dairy cows, and have milk supply. I just want to go back to some of the things Linda talked about at the very beginning, and actually Ann Beyer did a great job of talking about this as well, is really understanding your farm goals and what it is you want out of your livestock operation. So, and thinking about those resources that you have to devote. So time is a really big one. So for if you don't have a lot of time to devote, then you probably don't want to go into dairy cattle, because the time needed to milk animals every day is quite extensive. So if you're wanting something with a little bit less labor input, then beef cows might be a really good option for you. Really, cattle, like many of these other livestock species that we've talked about, they can be great to add fertility to your land. Use your forages, use those resources that you have. Definitely you need to think about their size. So cattle are quite a bit larger than any of these other livestock enterprises that we've talked about so far. So think about your land base and how much grazable acres you have. Cattle can be raised 100% on forage alone, grass finished, pasture raised dairy. Though sometimes, especially with dairy cows, you likely will be feeding grain, but you can raise them primarily on forage, but you just need a larger land base than with our other livestock species that we've discussed so far. Because they're larger, you need to think about handling. If you need handling facilities so that you can safely gather your animals, if you need to treat them for any health issues, or load them, it's going to require a little bit more substantial infrastructure than, sheep or goats are easy. You can just pick those up. Pigs you can't really pick up once they're to butcher size. They're a little harder, but some of these other things that have been smaller that we've talked about. So think about what infrastructure you have in place. And thankfully, cattle don't need as much fencing infrastructure as our sheep or goats. So that is one advantage. And think about hauling as well. You can't put a full-grown beef cow in the back of your pickup like you can with our sheep or goats or poultry or whatever it may be. So you are going to have access to a trailer if you are raising beef animals and taking them to processing. Like I said, you can raise them on forage, but if you're somewhere where you can't raise forage year round, you are going to have hay. And because of their larger size, round bales make more sense labor-wise and cost-wise than using square bales. But that also requires you to have a tractor. So you have to think about how these considerations kind of add up on themselves and help you make those decisions as to, you know, what livestock enterprises you're going to buy or start with, or really think about adding to your farm. And same for, you know, you're feeding hay, you have to have a place to store it. And so that takes some space. Processing has been mentioned with all livestock enterprises, and it really is an important topic to understand what processing options you have in your area. It can be a barrier to find processing, and if you're interested in selling to restaurants or to farmers markets, you know, having that USDA inspected, or if you're in a state with state inspected processing, to find those options. And, you know, as people have mentioned, the last 18 months during COVID, access to processing has been even more of a challenge because more people are trying to raise their own meat, and all those processing slots are filled up. So definitely check into that. Cash flow. Cattle take longer to grow. So you are and they're larger, typically more expensive. So you have a lot more invested. And because if you're raising meat, it can be 2 years before the animal is ready to process. So think about, you know, how much time you have money tied up in your animals before you're able to get some income. I want to mention this picture in the bottom left, those dairy cross steers. And that's actually from my farm. And this is one way we kind of handled cash flow as we are getting started, is in the spring, right before we had lots of grass coming on, we would buy dairy steers or dairy bull calves, wean calves, and raise them all through the growing season and sell them at the end of, you know, before we started feeding hay. And, you know, we made quite good money, and that was a really good way for us to buy cheap dairy steers and grow them up and then sell them. But then cattle prices went up, and we couldn't afford to even buy what used to be really cheap dairy steers. So, you know, a lot of this is dependent on those resources around you. Can you find the livestock that you're interested in raising? Can you find you know, young stock or breeder animals? You know, do you want to have a bull? And all there's lots of other issues. So I know this has been brief on all of these livestock enterprises, but the good news is we are here to help you and help answer your questions and help you think through the rest of the considerations for all of these livestock enterprises. All right, next.
We're almost to the farm tours, but I wanted to take a minute to talk about exotic species. They can be very lucrative. At least that's what the people selling the breeding stock will have you believe. So if you're thinking about something that's out of the ordinary, bison, alpacas, etc., you really have to do your homework. You definitely need to connect with others. Now, Mike Lewis wrote an excellent blog about pastured quail. That's a little bit out of the ordinary too. And in his blog, if you'll find that on the ATTRA site, I think we'll give you a link tomorrow. You'll see some of the things that you should look for. One is a market. 2 is figure out what the infrastructure needs to be like. Can you get it processed? Always visit other farms, and you can start small with pastured quail, and Mike did, which was really wise. But bison, that's going to take a whole lot of infrastructure, a lot of cost. So even more important to visit other farms. And I visited with Bison Creek Ranch, no, Brush Creek Bison, sorry, who provided me these pictures. And she made the point to tell you all that it needs to be regionally appropriate advice. She's in Missouri. She got a lot of great help from people in Kansas, but the pastures and the humidity made a big difference in Missouri rather than Kansas. So different set of problems, different set of forages. So again, do your homework, be really, really careful. Next. Oh, and learn about health and nutrition.
So there are so many things that you can do. There are so many options. And today we've just barely touched on a few of them. And there are many more options than we touched on today. And adding an enterprise to your farm can be a great way to make a small farm seem larger, because when you're doing multiple things on the farm, you can stack those enterprises so that they're using different resources, and that will make an area seem bigger. It'll provide a new income stream. Diversification is great. If one of your crops fails, if one of species of animals suddenly has a market crash, you have something to fall back on and something else to turn to. Also, diversifying your enterprises can be a great way to bring additional family members into the operation. If your enterprise won't support the whole family or won't support everyone, you may be able to add a totally different enterprise on the same land and bring in a new family member and make the operation pay a little more. Now, that said, there's one resource that doesn't expand as you add enterprises, and that is your labor. You can really max yourself out because you have to be able to take care of all these enterprises, and they demand that livestock demand feed every day. The livestock demand some different infrastructure. You can't use the same handling chutes for your sheep and for your cattle. It really just doesn't work very well. And your chickens cannot live in your sheep barn because it doesn't really mix very well. So if you're going to stack enterprises, be sure that there are things that mesh and stack together, and that there is some synergy, that there is some overlap there. Because you don't want to get in over your head. And especially with the marketing, when you're selling a different species, often it's a different processing requirement. There are different regulations. You might need to find a different way to package it. You might need to find a completely different sales outlet. So I will say I encourage people to stack enterprises, but definitely look for things that fit together and are synergistic. And try not to stack more than you can handle. That's kind of the recurring theme for the night, but it is true. Next, please. While we're looking here at these pictures of my farm, we're going to go on and do farm tours from the rest of the group as well. And we'll start off with, next please, my own farm. I live in Montana. We have a small diversified livestock farm called Shady Maple Farm, which is named for the giant maple trees that were planted around our house in 1929 when it was first built. And in Montana, there's not a lot of maple forest, so it's kind of a unique thing here. We raise Katahdin sheep, and we sell lamb and value-added lamb products. We also have Aberdeen Angus cattle, and we sell whole cows and cuts of cows and value-added beef products as well. We sell a lot of whole animals, some live animals as breeding stock, and we sell a lot at the farmers markets. This is my husband, David, and he is selling here at one of the many markets around our area that we do. I want to talk for just a second about farmers markets. They take a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to get ready. It takes a lot of time to get there. It takes a lot of time to sit there, and they are not always a great income stream. They have helped us meet people who have later bought animals from us. So it's a marketing tool, but you need to not be thinking that you're going to depend on farmers markets as your sole income source of product. And let's see, I guess that's all I wanted to say about farmers markets. So we'll go on to the next one. This is our farm. We are located in the valley, in the Mission Valley of Montana. And we approached our farm. It was an old and rundown farm when we bought it in 2003. And we've worked really hard to regenerate the pastures. We do a lot of rotational grazing, which means that we move the animals regularly and give the pasture a chance to recover. And in the time that we've been doing that, about the last 10 years, we've seen amazing recovery in the pasture in terms of species diversity. We have a lot more grass species. We have a lot more plant cover in general. We've been able to add some enterprises to the farm. Things like the chickens, they don't really pay their way as an enterprise for us, but it's something that's important to us for a lifestyle goal. We want to be able to eat organic eggs ourselves. So we raise enough organic eggs to sell that it pays for the organic feed for our chickens. And I guess I want to say that that's something that's important to us, is having a lifestyle where we can have the animals that we want. So we have some animals that are paying enterprises and some animals that we raise just because we want that experience. My daughter is in 4-H and she shows animals, goats and chickens and horses and all kinds of different animals. So we keep those on the farm, even though it's not a paying enterprise. But you need to balance your paying enterprises and your non-paying enterprises to make your operation viable in the long run. And I am happy to take any questions, but I'll hand this off to the next person.
Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm the other Linda. I'm the Montana Linda instead of the Arkansas Linda. And I have 320 acres up in north central Montana, just a little ways south of the Canadian border. And I have been on ranches all my life. I grew up on a commercial cattle ranch in Washington State, and it's always been my life, but my first love has always been wildlife. And so my operation is really about using my livestock and farming as a way to create habitat and money to be able to take care of the wildlife. So my ranch goal is to shepherd the prairie for full diversity and health of native plants and wildlife through regenerative relationships that build resilience in my life, the land, my business, and my community. I realize when I say that, it sounds a little bit like the 4-H pledge, which was a big part of what I did when I was a kid. I pledge my heart. Yeah, you know how that goes. Anyway, this picture, if you start in the top right-hand corner, that's kind of where I started with cattle. We also raise registered quarter horses. So I grew up horseback. And when I bought this place, the fencing that I put in, this is a rundown prairie homestead. It's only had 4 owners. After the Nakota and the White Clay Nations were removed from here, there's been 4 families on this place over time, and it's always been managed by cattle and horses. It's had hay. There's 70 acres of hay meadows, and I've done all those things on this place, but and I still do. I run cattle. That's my drought plan. I don't really have a drought plan. I have a good year plan, and if it's going to be a good year, I run cattle in addition to my sheep, and my sheep are my base operation. So why would I do that if I had nice horses and cattle? Why would I go to sheep? And it has to do partly with I just love them, like Linda Coffee. I just love sheep. But my ewes are 180 pounds, and they have a 5-month gestation. And I wean off of my ewes. I have a little over a 200% lamb crop. And those ewes will wean 2 90-pound lambs at 4 months of age. So I can sell the weight of the ewe every year off of these ewes, feeding them nothing other than the grass that they can get on my place. Because I'm not putting up the hay, then I can run the sheep out here. Tracy talked about stacked enterprises. I think about integrated enterprises. So livestock guardian dogs. I raise some litters. I have a lot of them. I've got 4 dogs to keep those sheep alive. There goes the profit margin, feeding 4. I have 500 pounds worth of livestock guardian dogs that take care of these things. I have some laying hens, and it's partly I love the eggs, but the other thing that they do for me is I let them loose in the ranch yard and they go into the barns and the feed areas, and they feed themselves largely on fly larvae and what they can scratch through there. So that's a good thing. I'm dog addicted too, and the border collies are a good other thing that I do. Next, please. I heard or saw one of the people saying, you know, one of the problems is selling cute things to people for them to eat. A lot of people don't want to eat cute little lambs, and I sometimes feel that way too. So I like having a nice wool enterprise as well as the meat enterprise. These sheep that I raise are a crossbred that I've been developing. 6 different breeds are in them. 4-inch staple length, very fine next to the skin type wool. For Nan and John, it's 17 to 21 micron wool in natural colors. And there's a real premium for that. If I take the time and put a coat on these sheep, I can get 6 pounds off of each sheep, and that will go for $20 a pound raw. So there's another $120 potential from that sheep. Doesn't happen with all of them. Don't want to put coats on all of them. But the idea here that I work on is diversity and balance. So diversity of the plants on the land, diversity in how I manage those plants, diversity in products, which we would also call diversification. And I am always happy to talk with people about sheep, about wool, of course, and anything else that might be of help. And I love talking to people about their own farms. So thanks for listening to this little bit about mine. Next, please.
I used to have 700 laying hens, and you can see me in the second photo there in that stage where I was raising a diversity of breeds, selling rainbow eggs, had a small CSA with crops, and also leasing a farm that included some merino sheep. So that's what's behind me there. And I didn't know then so much that I'm learning now. So I'm no longer farming at that place or raising chickens, because I now live where you see me in the blue shirt, and I plant a lot of cover crops, and I have a garden and a small orchard, and you may be able to tell that I live in a forested area. So predators are fairly common. So I'm doing the best I can here to increase the health of my soil by planting cover crops, by composting everything, by mulching, and so we get a really interesting array of fruits practically year round. The persimmons are in now. We have a few citrus and a few apples and plums and peaches, and boysenberries are probably my best thing. That makes some excellent jam. Let's look at the next slide. And some of what I've been working on is tending gardens, not necessarily only my own garden. There are a number of ways that we can be stewards of land, even when it's not ours. And one of the things we do, that rather indistinct picture to the left of the deer, is a rather innocent looking plant, but it's actually a very bad plant called stinkwort, very highly invasive. So we've been working on weeding that along roadsides and in our neighborhood, and helping people understand what it is that's really a weed and what's a bad weed, an invasive, non-native invasive. As many of you, I'm located in California in the Central Coast near Santa Cruz. And many of you may have heard on the news that we've had some bad fires in California the past few years. And so our neighborhood has been working hard on fuel reduction and managing the forest that we live among, so that it's growing all the time, and we need to manage that fuel because we have not continued or allowed to continue the practice of the indigenous people that is much more sustainable in terms of managing the forests and the lands. So we need to do it in another way now. So you can see the two photos at the upper right. It's the same location, believe it or not. You can see the same telephone pole there. So we did with the Resource Conservation District, a chipping program where we got the whole neighborhood to trim back and chip. And now we've added to the organic matter of our soil with those wood chips and reduce the fire hazard and fuel. So that will be a good sponge as the rains have begun here, and we're grateful every time the rains come. And just about 50 feet beyond that telephone pole, about a month ago, our neighbor came home one evening to find he had startled the mountain lion, and the deer that the mountain lion had just harvested. So the mountain lion then came back and dragged the deer into that ravine there. So we have a rich diversity of healthy large predators, which is really important to this ecosystem, so that there will be enough deer, but not too many. And enough and not too many seems to be a theme of many of our talks. And I want to show the pairs of pictures on the bottom left of a peach tree, our peach tree that had so many peaches that if I'd let all 5 of those grow, they would have been small and bitter, but one was pretty good. And similarly with the Oro Blanco grapefruit, when you have too many, none of them are going to be worth eating. And I also want to acknowledge just the picture of the creek and the watershed, that we're all part of some watershed that we need to take care of. And it's managing livestock well will keep the nutrients cycling on the land and not running off where they will do damage and harm to the watershed. And of course, so many animals, small animals, are important to our ecosystems, and also fungi that make our soils healthy and have webs of mycelia that most of us don't even know that they're around and working. But it's really important to acknowledge all the different types of creatures and diversity that make for a healthy ecosystem. And I applaud all of you for making your livestock operations a balanced part of that. Thanks.
Thanks again, everybody. Good to be back. This is Mike again. My family lives and farms in the western foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. We actually have a pretty diversified mountain farm, about 128 acres. Little deceiving because it's very steep, so we have a lot of woods. We live in a very small town. Our population is 108, and we have 87 Baptist churches. As I said, we are a very diversified farm. We do produce some industrial hemp currently for textile fibers. As you can see, we've got our cows and pigs out there. We raise a cross of our cattle are a cross between Wagyu and Jersey. Primarily that cross because of the meat profile and the sort of the resiliency of the Jersey blended into our region works really well. Our hogs, we've been they're an amalgamation of about 6 different breeds that we've been selecting and saving because we like them. We like their characteristics. They're able to forage pretty well for themselves. We also do a lot of work with local restaurants in terms of our markets. Most of our pork well, half of our pork goes to actually to a local food pantry, and the other half of it goes to a couple restaurants, minus 2 or 3 that we direct sell to consumers. We also run a small vegetable operation. You can probably go to the next slide, Carlos. You can see my daughter raises some cut flowers that she sells in a local CSA to about 15 or 16 local stores and businesses in town. She goes out and delivers them and collects her money and then gives it to her daddy like a good daughter should. We operate about depending on the season, between a 25 and 30 share CSA. And I know you're all very excited to see that moonshine still there, but that is actually an essential oil still. We do have a pretty good market distilling cedar essential oils, as well as some lavender that we've just started planting and harvesting. And that's probably enough for me.
Hey, all right, this is me again. As I mentioned, I'm in New Hampshire. Our farm is Foggy Hill Farm, and we're located in the southwest corner, right near the Vermont and Massachusetts border, on land that belonged to the Abenaki tribe. And if you're familiar with the New England landscape, we don't have big farms, but we have a lot of small farms. So our region is just dotted with a lot of small farms where consumers can sort of just stop off every few houses and pick up what they need, whether it's raw milk or eggs or produce, honey. So it's a really neat local food system and really a driving force behind our local food economy here. So we're primarily a diversified vegetable operation. We raise about 25 different varieties of crops. We, based on our climate, also utilize a lot of season extension techniques. And our whole design system is based around intensive production, which has taken several years to get to a point where we can really maximize our land base, knowing that our priority is soil health. But how do we get the highest quality food with the most nutrients is really important to us without jeopardizing soil health. So as you mentioned, we also raise bees, we have poultry, we're getting back into meat birds and possibly rabbits as well. We used to raise goats and sheep and a few dairy cows, but we also do a little bit of maple sugaring. The picture there in the upper left is sort of what we do around the house with our kids, just the old style buckets. But we also have an operation with a friend where we do about 800 taps through a tubing system. But that's very small scale in this region, although a lot of maple production is moving up to Canada as well as south. There's southern states are starting to get into the market as well. Next slide. So yeah, I'm supposed to mention a little bit about our goals and markets, which just completely align to one another. My wife and I started farming about 23 years ago together. She started farming well before that. But this farm, the current farm we're on, we started in 2011, and it's just a direct outcome of going through some whole farm planning. So we were able to sit down, look at where we were at with our old farm and what was working, what didn't work, and knowing that we had to recreate our family goals as well as our farm goals and figure out how we were going to manage towards them. And I really appreciate everyone sharing today has brought up some aspect of whole farm planning and really making sure that we manage towards those goals to really be sustainable and profitable. So our farm really focuses on feeding our community. We primarily operate as a CSA program for about 20 weeks out of the season. We also sell to 2 restaurants and a local market, but all of our food stays within about 8 to 10 miles of the farm. I really appreciate the comments earlier about farmers markets from Tracy. We haven't been to a farmers market in about 5-6 years. One is if we wanted to be profitable, we'd have to go into the Boston market, and that just didn't align with our family goals. But going to sort of our town market or local rural markets, it was just too much time off farm, too much time away from the kids, and not very profitable. And we were bringing home a lot of produce that either went to compost or to the food bank. So we don't go to farmers markets anymore for those reasons. And, you know, sort of as Ann was saying, we live in a beautiful area. We have lots of lakes about every 100 feet, 100 yards. So we also have the second most hiked mountain in the world, Mount Monadnock. So we just, you know, want to make sure that we have time to enjoy the beauty of this landscape and where we live. And that just really aligns to the goals we've created for what we want to manage towards with our farm. So I just want to add to, Ann mentioned sort of how their season's been going on the West Coast. This season we started in a drought that quickly turned into rain for several months. So in July, August, we averaged about 8.6 inches of rain combined. This year we had 30 inches. So it's been one of those seasons where it's just been incredible the amount of rain we've had and the amount of washouts we've had. That being said, it's, I think, part of, I don't want to say the new norm, but in terms of risk management, things we have to plan for and figure out how we're going to deal with climate adaptation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Felicia Bell, located in Jackson, Mississippi with the Gulf States Regional Office as an ag specialist. Our farm is RDNS Farm and it's located in Brandon, Mississippi. I'm not far from the office, just northeast. I'm fourth generation and my sons are fifth generation farmers, and we are farming the land that I was raised on. So I'm very grateful and honored to be able to do that. This is our logo. I was able to kind of create this and get someone to do it for me. So I'm just really proud of our logo and so forth. Bottom right is some of our vegetable production and also grass, because you'll see on the next slide that we need grass, a lot of it. And so we do vegetable production with diversified, and I inherited, of course, as I said, so a lot of things there have been there, and then I've tweaked it over the years. So we do have that vegetable production and then the grass. You could go to the next slide. So top left, starting up there, I inherit fruit and nut trees from my grandfather, and it did start our farm for as our capital is concerned, which he told me that it will do. So just selling those fruit and nuts started our farm operation to the RDNS farm. So again, been born and raised in this and been farming forever, but it's something that I love. And Mike, I'm glad you said about your daughter doing flowers. My youngest is doing the cut flowers as well. We got started in 2020, and it's been a new endeavor for mama to learn, but it's phenomenal, and we are in a cooperative here. We always have done live animal community events. That's just something we kind of got into. Again, my son as well, my oldest was in 4-H, and people knew that we raised sheep and all. And so a lot of the different holidays, we were called to bring the live animals. So we've always done that and love to do that for our community. And as you can see on the right, we raise sheep, and we raise the Gulf Coast native breed, and of course there's many names for it on the coast of the United States. And I have all the rare colors, so that black, red, and blue, which I'm very grateful for. And one of our last elders in the country that raised these particular, that has a closed herd, is located here in Mississippi. So that's how our herd got started, and it is a closed herd. The poultry we have, and we have many different things, ducks, chickens, quail. And then the lower left is the family businesses. So I have 3 sons, 29, 16, and 9, and all of them have businesses. That's what I promote. And so these are all of their logos. And I do love direct marketing. We do not do farmers market. We do other type of markets. And of course that shut down during the pandemic, and made me push our website. And so it's been lucrative in that, but I still love the direct marketing. So these are the things we do. Middle son does the vegan donuts, have written a book, and then I do prepared meals, value-added products with our herb production as well. And then my oldest son does farm infrastructure. So we appreciate you all joining us tonight. And I'll drop my email address in the chat, but thank you all for joining us. Next.
All right. It has been so fun to hear everybody talk about their farms, even though I know all these people and their farms, but it's still fun. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm Margot Hale, and I am in Northwest Arkansas in Prairie Grove and near our Fayetteville office. And my husband and I have a small operation, 20 acres, primarily pasture. We have just a little bit of woods. And we have, as everybody else, a diverse operation, primarily meat goats and a small herd of belted Galloway beef cows. We also usually raise a few hogs every year. Kind of the main goals of our operation, one is to raise a lot of our own food, and then we sell excess. You know, we do raise more than we can consume ourselves. My husband and I, we both grew up raising livestock, and so this is just what we like to do. We couldn't imagine our lives really without having a farm and raising livestock. It's really important to us to have the farm. We have 2 daughters, and letting them get the experience with animals and, you know, being raised on a farm and all the things that you can learn and the responsibilities you can have. So that's really important to us. So those are some of our main goals. And also I'll say, my husband he says we're lazy farmers, and it's not that we're lazy farmers, but we're busy. And so a big part of our farm is having enterprises and things set up so that our labor is minimal, just because we both work full time and have kids and, you know, all the things. And so we do direct market our beef and our pork to customers, but we only sell whole and half animals. So we are not doing cuts. We are not selling at farmers markets. We're not selling to restaurants. We want to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So we sell whole and halves, and we're also not marketing that many animals per year, just a few beeves and a couple of hogs each year. All right, you can go to the next slide. We also have a large garden, once again, primarily for ourselves, but we do sell some excess produce, and we definitely like to donate as well. We have a small orchard. And Buyer, I liked seeing the pictures of your peaches. I included, this was a couple of years ago. We just had bumper crop of peaches, which is really fun. This past year, we had a really hard freeze in February, and then a late freeze as well. And so we had no fruit this year other than June berries and some strawberries. So we really enjoy eating from our farm and being able to share with friends and family, and also sell a little bit. We also have laying hens. I actually have trouble finding a picture of our laying hens. Poultry are not my favorite enterprise. We do enjoy the eggs, but I don't take as many pictures of our chickens as I do our goats and our cows. They're, to me, not as cute. I did want to say about our belted Galloways. We talked about it in a few slides of, you know, what enterprise, what breed is the best. And I think all of us kind of alluded to it, but it's really just your preference. What you want is a big factor. You know, we knew we wanted to have some beef animals, and in our area, Angus cattle are the primary thing, or Hereford. And so we see black cattle everywhere. And we wanted something that was a little more enjoyable for us. And so we've always liked the looks of a belted Galloway, and they also do really well on pasture. They're really efficient. They're hardy. They're good moms. We've had zero health issues with them, and they make really good meat on forage alone. So, it started with just what we liked, what was our preference. Same for goats. Our land it is probably better suited for sheep, but my husband and I just like goats better. And so that's why we have goats. So, you can know all the things you should know and all the things that are probably best, but it really comes down to the preferences and what you want to do, what helps you meet your farm goals, and what you want to do on your farm. So I think that's all I have. And next.
So we've been farming a long time, and first in Kansas and then here in Arkansas. And when we started, we had 10 acres. We moved here in 96 with sheep and cattle, and we quickly realized cattle were not going to work on 10 acres. And so we sold them. Our goals were to raise food for our family and to raise our children. And we really, just like Margot said, we wanted our kids to have that experience, to learn the science, to learn the cycles of life and death and how to care for things. And the thing is with sheep, just one kid had that handled. So when we added the dairy goats, we saw things really blossom as far as the kids, because that required everybody to pitch in and help. And talking of stacking enterprises, the milk from the dairy goats also went to hogs, to bucket calves, and we expanded into meat goats for a short time because our customers said they wanted it. They didn't. We were able to add 40 acres, so our total is 50 acres, but it's not as much as it sounds like because most of it is wooded and rocks, maybe half grazable. We had 6 children through the years, and we kept them all very, very busy. Next. They grow up and they leave home. And so your labor situation changes over the years. And this is what we do now, sheep and only sheep. This was something that I fought. I did not want to simplify it, but keep it manageable is definitely something we need to do with jobs and with us wanting to travel. Our kids live far away. My parents are getting old. So we simplified. It's still interesting. I will say that through the seasons and managing the forage well and breeding our sheep are mostly Gulf Coast sheep like Felicia raises. I don't have the fun colors, but we enjoy our farm. We're trying to take good care of our farm. We're still raising food. It's not as diverse as I really preferred, but my husband promises me when he retires, we can go back and expand and do some more things again. We just have to keep it manageable. So thank you. You all have stayed on. I am at just about the end of, go ahead, Carlos, next slide. I'm at about the end of the class. I want to tell you before we move through the class, though, there's an upcoming course I want you to know about. It's called Women, Livestock, and the Land. I'm going to send out information on this tomorrow, so I won't take time right now. It's going to be a really cool class. I need 60 women in this class, and the hands-on trainings will be in Tennessee and in Arkansas next summer. So be looking for that, and please share that widely. Next. We're near the end of the time that I've allotted, so I just want to tell you again, and thank you so much for being here. NCAT, thank you so much for being here. I enjoyed this session so much, hearing about your farms, seeing the diversity and what you do, and I really appreciate you being here and teaching. I'm going to encourage you, class, if you missed the session, go back and revisit that because they all work together. And a really great place to start is getting to know what's on your farm. The soil, you were told how to assess that, plants, animals, people. Linda Poole's session in class 2 was really great for talking about that. Talk about your goals with your people and get on the same page. Sometimes it means somebody has to step back, as I had to do, to keep peace in the family and to keep things manageable. So it takes some work working through the process. Check into the resources. You're getting a resource page tomorrow. It will have everyone's contact information that you listened to tonight. It will have links to all the production information we didn't have time to give you tonight. I encourage you to visit SARE, reach out to us, and please let us know what you need. what you like, what you want to see more of. Remember that advanced grazing class that the NCAT staff are going to do. There are a lot of resources coming out. I want you, please, to do this evaluation poll because it's so important for our funders. If you would, there's only 5 questions. I'm keeping it as simple as I can. Can you all see that or no? You can? Okay. Hey, Xavier, thank you. Thank you for being here. Xavier is NRCS in my state, and I'm very happy to have, he's also registered, certified, I think is the word, beekeeper. So Andy, I'm sure he would enjoy talking with you some more and the rest of you. Thank you all for being here. Let's look at the next slide while they're doing that. Okay, yeah, resources, we have tons. You're gonna get all of this tomorrow. Lee put this together for you. We are here. Taking your farm to the next level tutorial. That's the one I want to especially mention because that goes into the business end of it. Several of us have mentioned business and budgeting and things. That's a really good place to look. Next. Okay, here's our contact information. Again, you're going to get this tomorrow. And I know by the end of today, you've recognized somebody that you want to talk to more. So I'd encourage you to do that. Next. That's it. We mean to take questions, and we've enjoyed ourselves so much. I think we're at the end of our time without questions. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question before we sign off? Okay, I've taken you like 10 minutes over. Just thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your attention. Teachers, thank you so much. And everybody have a good night. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to have a final evaluation